Patricia Meredith had lived in the Riverside Heights subdivision for 31 years when she walked into a situation that would destroy her reputation and cost her $890,000. She was 63 years old, retired, comfortable, and apparently convinced that her assumptions about who belonged in public spaces were infallible. One Saturday afternoon in late June, she saw a black family setting up a barbecue at Riverside Park's main pavilion and decided they didn't belong there. The family was hosting a reunion, 40 members across 3 generations, with a permit they'd secured 6 weeks in advance. What Patricia Meredith didn't know was that she was confronting Councilwoman Denise Holloway and Councilman Marcus Holloway, 2 of the most respected elected officials in Charlotte, North Carolina. What Meredith did next, calling 911 with false claims, refusing to acknowledge their identity, and escalating until officers arrived, would become a textbook example of how racial bias destroys lives, credibility, and finances. A black family in their finest casual summer clothes. The Holloways had gathered at Riverside Park's largest pavilion for their annual reunion. Councilwoman Denise Holloway, 54, was arranging flower centerpieces on picnic tables while her husband Marcus supervised the grill setup. Their permit was laminated and displayed prominently on the reservation post. No violation, no disturbance, no crime. Just a family celebrating together in a space they'd reserved through proper channels. But Patricia Meredith saw them through a filter so distorted by assumptions that she couldn't process a black family as legitimate park users. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Riverside Park sits on 12 acres along the eastern edge of Charlotte's Riverside Heights neighborhood. It's the kind of park that anchors a community. Soccer fields stretching toward the tree line, a playground that fills with children every weekend, walking trails that wind through old-growth oaks, and 3 pavilions that host everything from birthday parties to corporate picnics. The main pavilion, Pavilion A, is the largest, with seating for 60, 3 built-in grills, electrical outlets, and a view of the pond where families feed ducks on Sunday afternoons. Riverside Heights itself is an interesting slice of Charlotte demographics. The neighborhood was historically white and working class, but over the past 20 years, it's become increasingly diverse. Black professionals moved in as property values rose. Hispanic families established roots. Asian business owners opened shops along the main corridor. The demographics shifted, but some longtime residents never quite adjusted to the change. It was 1:47 p.m. on a Saturday in late June. The temperature hovered around 84 degrees. A light breeze carried the smell of barbecue across the park. The main pavilion was decorated with blue and gold streamers, a banner reading Holloway Family Reunion 2025, and balloons tied to every post. Children ran between tables while adults set up folding chairs, arranged serving dishes, and caught up with relatives they hadn't seen since last year. The kind of afternoon where nothing dramatic typically happens. The kind of celebration that takes place in parks across America every summer weekend. Councilwoman Denise Holloway had served on the Charlotte City Council for 11 years. 11 years of budget hearings, community meetings, zoning disputes, and constituent services. She'd championed affordable housing initiatives that created 2,400 units for low-income families. She'd secured funding for 3 community centers in underserved neighborhoods. She'd led the council's effort to establish civilian oversight of the police department, a reform that earned her both praise and criticism. Her colleagues called her thorough. Her constituents called her accessible. The Charlotte Observer had named her one of the city's most effective council members 3 years running. Her husband, Marcus Holloway, had been on the council for 8 years, elected 3 years after Denise. He chaired the Transportation Committee, overseeing a $2.3 billion transit expansion that would connect suburban communities to downtown. He'd worked on economic development deals that brought 3 major employers to the region. Together, they were Charlotte's most prominent political couple, 2 people who dedicated their careers to public service. Denise had earned her undergraduate degree from Spelman College, graduated magna cum laude, then completed her MBA at Duke's Fuqua School of Business. Before politics, she'd spent 15 years in corporate finance, rising to vice president at Bank of America. Marcus had attended Howard University, then earned his law degree from UNC Chapel Hill. He'd practiced civil rights law for 12 years before running for office, winning cases that established important precedents for voting rights and employment discrimination. He still kept his bar license active. At 54 and 57, respectively, Denise and Marcus Holloway were exactly where they'd worked to be: respected, influential, and deeply connected to their community. They'd raised 2 children in Riverside Heights, sent them to public schools, and watched them graduate from college. Their daughter was now a pediatric resident at Carolina's Medical Center. Their son was a civil engineer working on the same transit project Marcus oversaw. The family reunion was an annual tradition, started by Marcus's grandmother 53 years earlier. 4 generations gathered every June, traveling from as far as California and New York. This year, 42 people had confirmed attendance. That Saturday, Denise had arrived at Riverside Park at 10:30 a.m. to begin setup. Marcus came at 11:15 after picking up the meat from the butcher. Family members filtered in throughout the morning, each bringing dishes, decorations, and updates on their lives. By 1:30 p.m., the pavilion was transformed. Tables covered with blue tablecloths. A buffet line forming along the left side. Children playing tag near the pond. Marcus had fired up the grill, and the first batch of ribs was already smoking. Denise wore a blue sundress and comfortable sandals. Marcus had on khaki shorts and a golf shirt. Neither looked like what they were: elected officials who could pick up the phone and reach the mayor, the police chief, or any department head in the city. Their permit was laminated and displayed on the reservation post at the pavilion entrance, exactly where park rules required it. But to one person watching from across the park, the Holloway family's presence was a problem. A black family this size, in this pavilion, with this much food and celebration, in Patricia Meredith's mind, something had to be wrong. And she had decided to do something about it. Patricia Meredith was 63 years old. She'd lived in Riverside Heights since 1994, watching the neighborhood change in ways she didn't always appreciate. She was retired from a career as a bank branch manager, comfortable on her pension and investments, and deeply invested in maintaining what she called community standards. Her neighbors described her as vigilant. The Riverside Heights HOA board described her as passionate about enforcement. In 3 years, Patricia Meredith had filed 14 complaints with various authorities. 14. 9 of them involved people of color in public spaces. She'd called animal control on a Hispanic family whose dog she claimed was aggressive. The dog was a 12-pound Pomeranian. She'd reported a black teenager to police for suspicious behavior. He was delivering newspapers on his bike route. She'd filed noise complaints against an Indian family hosting a Diwali celebration. They had a permit. The celebration ended at 8 p.m. She'd called code enforcement on a black contractor's truck parked on her street. The truck was there for 3 hours while he repaired a neighbor's roof. The pattern was clear. Patricia Meredith monitored her neighborhood for people who didn't fit her image of who belonged there. When she found them, she called authorities. When authorities didn't act, she escalated. She'd sent letters to the city council complaining about outsiders using Riverside Park. She'd submitted public comments opposing affordable housing developments. She'd circulated a petition asking for increased police patrols to address what she called safety concerns in the area. Her complaints had never resulted in any citations, arrests, or findings of actual wrongdoing. But they consumed significant city resources. A review of her call history showed she'd contacted 911 4 times in the past 18 months. None of the calls involved actual emergencies. That Saturday, Patricia Meredith was walking her standard poodle along the park's perimeter trail when she noticed the activity at Pavilion A. A large group, black family, grilling meat, children everywhere. In her mind, red flags multiplied. This didn't look like the park's usual users. The pavilion was supposed to be reserved for residents. These people probably just showed up and took over. They were probably violating fire codes with that grill. She didn't check the permit posted at the pavilion entrance. She didn't ask anyone whether they had authorization. She didn't consider that maybe, just maybe, this family had every right to be there. At 1:52 p.m., Patricia Meredith dialed 911. Hi, I need to report some people illegally occupying a pavilion at Riverside Park. They don't have a permit, and they're causing a disturbance. Can you send someone? The dispatcher asked follow-up questions. What kind of disturbance? They're making a lot of noise. There are too many of them. I don't think they're supposed to be here. Are they being threatening? Not directly, but they're very loud, and there are a lot of them. I just don't think they have permission. Patricia Meredith had made her call. Officers were dispatched, and the Holloway family reunion was about to be interrupted. After making the call, Meredith didn't leave. She watched from 30 yards away, arms crossed, waiting for police to arrive. But after 5 minutes of watching this black family celebrate laughing, eating, children playing, she couldn't contain herself any longer. She walked directly toward the pavilion. Do you think citizens should face consequences for filing false reports about people of color using public spaces? Drop your answer below. Denise Holloway was adjusting a centerpiece when she became aware of a white woman marching toward the pavilion with purpose in her step. The woman's face was set in that particular expression. Denise recognized immediately the look of someone who'd already made up their mind about a situation and was coming to enforce their judgment. Excuse me. You can't have that grill here. Denise set down the flowers and turned to face her. We have a permit. This is our family reunion. Patricia Meredith didn't acknowledge the response. Her eyes swept across the pavilion, counting heads, assessing the scene, finding evidence for the narrative she'd already constructed. This is a public park. Marcus had moved from the grill to stand beside his wife. His expression remained calm, but Denise could see the tension in his shoulders. 20 years of civil rights law had taught him to recognize exactly what was happening here. Ma'am, we reserved this pavilion 6 weeks ago. We have every right to be here. Meredith's lip curled slightly. I don't believe you. I'm calling the police. Denise felt the familiar exhaustion that came with these moments. The weight of having to prove again that she belonged in a space she had every legal right to occupy. The knowledge that her word wouldn't be enough, that evidence wouldn't matter, that this woman had already decided the truth. Feel free. We'll be right here when they arrive. Marcus walked to the pavilion entrance and pointed to the laminated permit displayed exactly where park regulations required it. Here's our permit. Pavilion A, June 28th, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Issued by the Charlotte Parks and Recreation Department. Holloway Family Reunion. Would you like to read it? Meredith glanced at the permit but didn't move closer to examine it. That could be fake. Ma'am, that's a city-issued permit with a QR code that links directly to the reservation system. You can verify it in 30 seconds with your phone. Meredith didn't reach for her phone. Instead, her voice rose loud enough for other family members to hear. I've lived in this neighborhood for 30 years. I know who belongs here. This is where bias becomes impenetrable. Patricia Meredith was looking at physical evidence, a city-issued permit, displayed properly, with verification technology built in. She was speaking to articulate adults who explained their presence clearly and calmly, but none of it could penetrate the assumption she'd made the moment she saw a large black family in her park. Denise Holloway had spent 11 years on the city council. She'd authorized the budget for the Parks Department. She'd voted to approve the online reservation system this permit came from. And none of that credentialed authority mattered to a woman who decided black people didn't belong. I'm Councilwoman Denise Holloway. My husband is Councilman Marcus Holloway. We represent this district. For a moment, Meredith's face flickered, something passing through her expression too quickly to identify. Surprise? Doubt? Recognition? But then her jaw set harder. I don't care who you think you are. You're not supposed to be here. This is where assumptions become accusations. Patricia Meredith had processed the permit. She'd heard the titles. Somewhere in her mind, she registered that these might actually be elected officials with legal authorization to use this space. But admitting that would mean admitting she was wrong. It would mean acknowledging that her initial judgment, black family, doesn't belong, was based on nothing but prejudice. And for some people, maintaining the bias is more important than accepting the evidence. Family members had stopped what they were doing. Conversations died. Children were quietly moved toward the far end of the pavilion. Phones came out. Marcus's nephew, a 26-year-old software engineer named Terrence, began recording on his phone. The scene was being documented from multiple angles. I've already called the police. They'll sort this out. Denise felt her composure tested in a way it rarely was during contentious council meetings. Ma'am, when the police arrive, they will see our permit, verify our reservation, and confirm what we've already told you. You're harassing a family at a private event. You're disturbing the peace. Look at all this. Meredith gestured at the decorations, the food, the family members watching silently. This is excessive. Marcus stepped forward slightly. His voice carried the calm authority of someone who'd argued before judges and juries. Ma'am, I need you to understand something. We are city council members. We have authorized permits for park use. We represent this district. And you are currently on video harassing us at our family reunion. Every word you say is being recorded. Meredith's face flushed. But she didn't back down. We'll see what the police say. A patrol car had appeared at the park entrance. Should citizens face automatic civil penalties for continuing harassment after being shown valid permits? Let me know what you think. 2 officers emerged from the vehicle. Officer David Chen, a 12-year veteran, and Officer Amanda Foster, on the force for 3 years. They walked toward the pavilion, Meredith moving to intercept them. Officers, thank God you're here. These people don't have permission to be here. They took over the pavilion. Chen and Foster exchanged a glance. They could see the permit posted at the entrance. They could see the professional setup, the family members watching calmly, the phones recording. Ma'am, can you step aside for a moment? Officer Chen walked toward the permit and examined it. Pavilion A, June 28th, Holloway Family Reunion. This is a valid city permit. It's fake. Ma'am, I can scan the QR code right now. Chen pulled out his phone and did exactly that. The Parks Department reservation page loaded immediately. Reservation confirmed. This family has authorization to use this space until 6 p.m. Denise stepped forward. Officer, I'm Councilwoman Denise Holloway. This is my husband, Councilman Marcus Holloway. We represent District 4. Officer Chen recognized the names immediately. His expression shifted from professional neutrality to something approaching alarm. Councilwoman Holloway. Councilman, I apologize for the interruption to your event. Meredith's voice rose. You're not even going to question them? They could be lying about who they are. Ma'am. Officer Foster's tone was firm. These are elected officials. They have a valid permit. They've done nothing wrong. This is ridiculous. I've lived here for 30 years. Chen turned back to Meredith. Ma'am, you called 911 to report a disturbance that doesn't exist and trespassing that hasn't occurred. The people you reported are city council members with proper authorization. At this point, you need to leave them alone. Within 8 minutes of the initial officer's arrival, a marked supervisor's vehicle pulled into the park. Sergeant Michelle Torres emerged, a 23-year veteran who'd seen her share of frivolous complaints, but rarely one involving seated council members at their own family event. She walked directly to the pavilion, assessed the scene with the practiced eye of someone who understood exactly what she was looking at. Councilwoman Holloway. Councilman, I'm Sergeant Torres. I received a call about the situation here. Marcus nodded. Sergeant, we're hosting our family reunion. We have a permit. This woman accused us of trespassing and called 911. Meredith interjected. They're lying. They don't belong here. Torres turned to face her fully. The sergeant's expression was unreadable, but her voice carried weight. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need honest answers. Did you verify whether they had a permit before calling 911? I could tell they didn't. Did you ask them directly? They're obviously not telling the truth. Did you check the permit posted right there on that post before making accusations? Meredith said nothing. Torres pulled out her department phone and called the Parks Department's after-hours line. The conversation was brief. Pavilion A, Riverside Park, permit verification for June 28th. The confirmation came back within 2 minutes. Holloway family reunion. Reservation made 6 weeks ago. Paid in full. Valid from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Torres ended the call and looked at Meredith with an expression that had gone cold. Ma'am, these council members have a valid permit. They've had it for 6 weeks. You called 911 with false information about people lawfully using a public facility. Do you understand the position you've put yourself in? Torres stepped closer to Meredith, lowering her voice, but not so much that the nearby family members couldn't hear. Filing a false report is a criminal offense. Harassment based on race is a civil rights violation. You've done both on camera, to elected officials. in front of 40 witnesses. I was just concerned about the community. You were concerned that black people were using a park in your neighborhood. That's not community concern. That's bias. And it's going to have consequences. Torres turned back to the Holloways. Councilwoman, Councilman, on behalf of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, I apologize for this interruption. You have every right to continue your event without further harassment. If this individual approaches you again, please call immediately. Denise nodded. Thank you, Sergeant. We'll be filing a formal complaint. I understand completely. I'll ensure the incident report reflects exactly what occurred here. Torres walked Meredith back to the park entrance, speaking to her in low tones. Family members later reported hearing fragments. Never call 911 again unless there's an actual emergency. Lucky they're not pressing charges today. Lawyer if I were you. Meredith left the park. The Holloway family reunion resumed. But the damage was done. The joy of the celebration had been interrupted by a woman who couldn't accept black people existing in public space. Should citizens who file false, race-based 911 calls face mandatory civil rights training and community service? Drop your answer. Within 6 hours, the videos had exploded across social media. Terrence had posted his recording on Twitter with a simple caption, "My aunt and uncle are city council members. This woman called 911 on our family reunion." The video showed everything. Meredith's accusations, the permit clearly visible, the council members identifying themselves, the officers confirming the family's legal right to be there, Meredith's refusal to accept reality. Charlotte woman calls police on city council members' Family BBQ. Karen confronts black family at park, their elected officials. Councilwoman harassed at own family reunion by neighbor. Who knows who belongs? The outrage was immediate and intense. The Charlotte NAACP issued a statement within hours, demanding accountability. The mayor's office released a statement supporting the Holloways. National civil rights organizations picked up the story. By Monday morning, Patricia Meredith had been identified by name. Her social media accounts were found and scrutinized. Her history of complaints became public knowledge. Local news ran segments featuring her previous calls to authorities about people of color in the neighborhood. Patricia Meredith's life imploded within 72 hours. Her name was everywhere. News vans parked outside her house. Journalists called her phone. Neighbors who'd tolerated her complaints for years suddenly had opinions they were willing to share on camera. She released a statement through a hastily hired attorney. "I regret any misunderstanding. I was simply concerned about park regulations and had no intention of causing harm." The statement satisfied no one. The Holloways filed a civil lawsuit 3 weeks after the incident. The complaint named Patricia Meredith individually and sought damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress, violation of civil rights under Section 1983, defamation, through false statements to police, harassment, and discrimination based on race, and interference with lawful use of public facilities. The complaint was 47 pages long. It included transcripts of Meredith's 911 call, the full video footage from multiple angles, statements from family members who witnessed the confrontation, documentation of Meredith's pattern of complaints against people of color. The pattern section was particularly damning. 14 complaints in 3 years, 9 involving people of color, 0 resulting in any actual violations found. The documentation painted a picture of systematic harassment disguised as community vigilance. Meredith's attorneys reviewed the evidence and reached a conclusion their client didn't want to hear. The videos were everywhere. The council members were sympathetic and credible. The pattern of prior complaints eliminated any argument that this was an isolated misunderstanding. A jury would not be kind. The settlement came 8 months after the incident. $890,000, paid from Meredith's personal assets. Her homeowner's insurance denied coverage, citing intentional conduct exclusions. Additional terms required Meredith to complete 200 hours of community service with civil rights organizations, attend a 40-hour implicit bias training program, issue a public written apology, acknowledging her conduct was racially motivated. The settlement devastated Patricia Meredith financially. She'd planned to live comfortably on her pension and savings. Now, at 63, she faced selling her home to cover the judgment. Her attorney released a brief statement after the settlement was announced. Miss Meredith accepts responsibility for her actions and is committed to learning from this experience. The Riverside Heights HOA quietly removed her from any volunteer positions. Neighbors who'd once considered her a vigilant community member now avoided eye contact. Should individuals who engage in racially motivated harassment face permanent civil consequences, including credit reporting? Let me know in the comments. The Charlotte City Council held a public hearing on discriminatory 911 calls 3 months after the incident. Denise Holloway was the final speaker. I've served on this council for 11 years. I've attended thousands of meetings, hearings, and community events. I've never been nervous to speak in public. But standing here today, talking about what happened to my family, is harder than any vote I've ever cast. She paused, gathering herself. We were at our family reunion, an annual tradition that goes back 53 years, started by my husband's grandmother. 42 people, 4 generations, gathered to celebrate our family. We had a permit. We had decorations. We had food on the grill. We were doing what families do in parks every single weekend. Another pause. And a woman who'd never met us, who'd never spoken to us, who'd never checked whether we had authorization to be there. She called 911 to report us as trespassers. Not because we'd done anything wrong. Not because we'd violated any rule. But because we're black. Her voice strengthened. I showed her our permit. She said it was fake. My husband identified us as city council members. She said she didn't care. Officers confirmed our reservation was valid. She still insisted we didn't belong. That's not confusion. That's not a misunderstanding. That's bias so deep it overrides physical evidence. She looked directly at her colleagues. I have credentials. I have 11 years on this council. I have a law-abiding family and a 6-week-old permit. And none of it mattered to someone who'd already decided that black people don't belong in her park. If this can happen to me, to my family, what happens to the people without titles? What happens to the family that doesn't have cameras rolling? What happens to the young man who can't prove his right to exist in a space because his word isn't believed? The chamber was silent. $890,000 is accountability. But it doesn't give me back the joy of my family reunion. It doesn't undo the fear my grandchildren felt when police arrived because someone thought our celebration was a crime. It doesn't erase the message that was sent that day. You can have permits, you can have titles, you can have every legal right to be somewhere, and it still won't be enough for some people. She stepped back from the microphone. We need to change this, not just for my family. For everyone who's been questioned, challenged, and criminalized for existing while black. Should cities establish dedicated funds to compensate victims of racially motivated 911 calls without requiring litigation? Drop your answer. This wasn't about one woman at one park on one Saturday afternoon. This was about a system that allows people to weaponize public resources against citizens they've decided don't belong. Patricia Meredith's record told a story her neighbors had ignored for years. 14 complaints in 3 years. 9 involving people of color. A Hispanic family's Pomeranian. A black teenager on a paper route. An Indian family's permitted celebration. Each call consumed city resources. Each call disrupted someone's life. Each call sent the same message. You don't belong here, and I have the power to make your presence uncomfortable. The pattern was clear. The documentation existed. But until she confronted someone with the resources to fight back, nothing changed. Patricia Meredith paid $890,000. That's accountability. She was publicly identified and ostracized. That's consequences. She'll spend 200 hours working with civil rights organizations and 40 hours in bias training. But money and community service don't undo the trauma of having your family celebration interrupted by police. They don't restore the joy that was stolen from the Holloway reunion. They don't erase the fear that children felt when officers approached their grandparents. The real question is, what changes now? Do we finally establish civil penalties for false reports that waste emergency resources and target people based on race? Do we finally create systems to track patterns of discriminatory complaints before they escalate? Do we finally acknowledge that community concern is too often code for, I don't want certain people in my space? Because if we don't fix the culture that taught Patricia Meredith to see a black family celebration as a threat, If we don't address the entitlement that convinced her she could decide who belongs in public parks, then we're just waiting for the next caller, the next victim, the next viral video. Comment if you believe this should be law. Individuals who file false 911 reports targeting people based on race face automatic civil penalties, mandatory bias training, and documented pattern tracking that triggers enhanced consequences for repeat behavior. And if you think these stories need to be told, if you believe accountability starts with awareness and change starts with pressure, then hit that subscribe button. We're not stopping. We're going to keep exposing these patterns. We're going to keep demanding better. We're going to keep fighting for the families at barbecues, the professionals in coffee shops, the homeowners in their own driveways, everyone who deserves to exist in public spaces without being criminalized. This isn't just about one woman or one family reunion. It's about all of us and the world we're willing to accept. When we allow bias to weaponize public resources against innocent people, we all pay the price. The Holloways paid with their disrupted celebration. Patricia Meredith paid with $890,000 and her reputation, but the real cost is the trust we lose every time someone decides that certain people don't belong.